Good morning. You listen to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Kermit Baker, a Harvard economist who focuses both on the architectural building side of the business and also in the home remodeling business. Kermit, how you doing?
I'm doing well today, Kemp, all things considered.
Yeah, all things considered. We need to probably start with that this will be over eventually, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a manufactured is not the right term, but this is all a controlled downward cycle here. Absolutely it'll be over, and I think the government has a great influence on when it'll be over and how it'll be over. It's very different from a lot of other cycles we've been through.
All right, so let's start with the fact that our economy was probably the strongest it had been in a long time. In early March, everything was banging along like we have never seen, and we've had this virus, we've had to shut everything down. Question we'll get to in a minute is what does recovery look like, but let's cover a few of the things. You put out a special report recently, which I found very interesting. It's one you do on a quarterly basis, the Home Design Trend Survey. I just want to point out, you were talking about the home builder side of the business and how it had been sluggish for the last 10 years, and comparing it to other decades, just wasn't performing like we've seen in decades since the 70s. And yet, at this point in 2020, we were seeing a glimmer of hope in the builder market with millennials reaching that age where they were deciding that maybe home ownership was the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. You're actually seeing some very strong numbers coming out of the housing side. So to summarize what your point, Kemp, we started 10 million new homes over the last decade, 2010 to 2019. That compared to much closer to 15 million new homes every decade since the 1970s. So we were grossly underbuilding the market for good reasons. We went through a huge collapse, and it hit the financial sector and things like that. But we saw the numbers at the end of 2019 and January, February 2020 very strong. We were getting up to 1.5, 1.6 million starts on an annualized basis those months, about the level we thought we should be at the very least, just to accommodate the new households being formed. So you said the economy was very strong coming into 2020. I would say that home building was at the vanguard of that strength. It was one of the strongest sectors in our economy, and really firing very strongly. So it certainly hit the residential sector at exactly the wrong time.
So in your next little section in that report talks about coping with a significant setback, and you've got some burger dots there that I thought were interesting. The one I think is most important as we think about what the shape of the recovery is going to be is this consumer nervousness. The consumer, let's say the millennial, 30 years old, got a couple of babies, and they're looking at mortgage rates, and it's very encouraging. It's an incentive, but then, wait a minute, this is now the right time. So that's going to be a little setback, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a problem. We just got a unemployment claims report this morning, and so we're up to well over 20 million folks that have filed for unemployment insurance since the middle of March. So just really spiraling down very quickly. And once we get the April employment report, we're going to see that the national unemployment rate is high teens, maybe even 20%. So that certainly puts a little damper on. Is this a great time to go out and buy a home? Should I be extending myself? Number one. Number two, I think banks are going to be, probably appropriately so, a little more hesitant about making mortgage loans in this environment. They're going to be clamping down. At the same time, consumers are saying, gee, is this really the time I want to make that level of investment? Maybe I'm better off holding on to my rental unit for another 6, 9, 12 months until things clear up a little bit.
Well, let me throw a caveat on this unemployment number. As the CARES Act came out, it gave an incentive, especially for those that had arm's length relationship, contractor 1099 type relationships, and also companies that have over 500 employees, to furlough. I mean, in other words, it actually gave you an extra $600 and said maybe this is the way to do it. Let the government pay for these people for a little while. So some of these numbers were somewhat motivated by the way they structured CARES, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, and it probably accelerated. I think a lot of companies would have said, let me hold on to my employees and kind of see what's going on a little bit. Typically, businesses don't pull the trigger that quickly. They kind of look around a little bit and see how business is slowing down. I think you're absolutely right. Now there was a huge incentive to kind of get out in front of this and just cut those employees off immediately. That's why we've seen the numbers that have just been jaw-dropping in terms of the magnitude of them. I think you're making a good point. Let's watch the month, the weekly numbers moving forward, see if they tend to settle down at a more sane pace. There's a lot of folks out there, even with unemployment insurance, that don't have the incomes they did prior to that. So clearly it's going to be a hit on the economy.
All right, so John Hopkins tracks the numbers, and the number of new cases are on the decline. We're watching what's going on in Germany. They're talking about the fact they're going to open up. Sometime, probably in mid-May, especially in rural areas, we'll see this country start to fire up the economy. What do you think the recovery looks like? And let me ask you three different ways. What's it look like overall? What's it look like for people in the commercial business, and what's it look like for people in the retail replacement business?
Yeah, I think you're making a great point. I mean, I think what we've all been struggling with recently is, how does this recovery shape up, and what are the signs that people need? What are signs that government needs to kind of reopen things? And I think it's pretty clear it's going to be in stages, and it's going to vary a lot by market sector. I do believe that the residential side is probably going to be one of the sectors, certainly in construction, that sees stronger numbers first. Housing generally leads a recovery. I think once people start settling back into jobs with these low mortgage rates that you mentioned, that'll move quickly. I think we're going to see much longer-term decline on the commercial side of the market. We just did a survey, updated our construction forecast. Number one, the sense is we're going to see double-digit declines this year in non-residential building activity, building spending. Number two, the sectors are going to be the hardest hit are on the commercial side, particularly retail and lodging, the two sectors they see the hardest hit. Not as pessimistic about the office side. And I have to tell you, from what I've heard, there's a lot of companies out there that say, telecommuting is not that bad. My employees can be pretty efficient working at home with all the technology we have, and I'm not sure I need that much office space moving forward. Even when things recover, I think I could encourage some of my employees to telecommute, and I'm guessing a lot of them will want to telecommute, that they've gone through this whole experience, and it's worked out for them okay, other than their kids being home with them, but kind of working remotely is not that challenging under the right circumstances, and I think we might see business handled very differently coming out of this downturn.
Interesting. Caveat to that, or maybe a counter perspective, is they're going stir crazy and they want to get back with their coworkers, but that might be short lived. So
yeah, and even to follow up on that, they're going stir crazy, but they've also spent a fair amount of time saying, what kind of things might I want to do to my home here? That a lot of stuff that they hadn't focused on that might say, gee, maybe I want to do this or do that, and there's a lot of anecdotal stories of DIY home improvement activity really spiking pretty dramatically here as households have a little more time on their hands, kind of can see the to-do list and start tackling it.
So there's a $22 trillion economy here, and once you slow it down, it takes a little while to get it started. What's the recovery look like? Is it a V or U, an L? What's it look like?
Yeah, not a V. I think it'll be in stages. I think residential will be one of the first ones out of the gate. I'm guessing we'll see a positive fourth quarter on the residential side. For the rest of the building market, I'm guessing more mid-year 2021 before we see any significant numbers. I mean, I'm going back to the 2008-2009 downturn, which was a six-quarter national economic downturn, so very different. This will be, I think, probably 3 quarters. But it took the construction industry almost 4 years to get its footing again. So I think here, as I say, even if it bounces back in mid-year 2021, that's only 4 or 5 quarters. And so I think we'd be fairly lucky if we start to see an upturn in building activity by the middle of next year.
Mm-hmm. The Architectural Billing Index that you come out with, you've only done January and February, and I guess March is probably coming pretty soon, so I expect it'll be below 50, wouldn't you say?
It'll be released next week. It'll be below 50. I think it's safe to assume that, Kemp. I think the question is, will it be below 40 or not? I mean, I think, with the downturn we've seen in other sectors, I expect it to be fairly dramatic.
Well, Kermit, I appreciate you spending time with us and giving us a read. I know you're in high demand right now. Everybody wants to know what's Harvard thinking about what this is going to look like. Keeping you busy, isn't it?
It is. Not a dull moment. Economists are busy at this time of the cycle. We're not waiting for things to happen.
And I should mention you're working from home, so you're doing your part, right?
I am. I'm social distancing. Gotten to know my wife a lot better over the last month, Kemp.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk again. Hopefully not as long between the next one. I want to know what you think the long-term effect's going to be. We'll get to that next time. Again, been talking to Kermit Baker, a Harvard economist, and you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.